I knew that my father would be released from prison in about 2 years, but by then, I had built a network of support and security strong enough to ensure he wouldn't dare approach me again. At last, I had found peace, an inner calm I hoped would last for the rest of my life. After the traumatic incident, life slowly began to return to a sense of normalcy. A year passed, and I found myself falling into the rhythm of everyday life. 6 months after the ordeal, I met someone special on a dating app, and our connection quickly grew deeper. My business flourished, and everything seemed to align. Despite the relentless calls from the police station urging me to speak with my father and accept his apologies, I ignored them. After everything he had done, he didn't deserve a second chance. 2 years later, I was about to marry the wonderful man I had met online. My fiancé was everything I could have dreamed of, understanding, supportive, and dedicated to making me happy. He knew about my past and stood by me in every decision, ensuring my well-being. At our wedding, when it came time for me to be escorted down the aisle, my best friend's father, who had welcomed me into his family when I had nowhere else to turn, stepped in. The feeling of gratitude I had for the incredible people in my life was overwhelming. They had been my healing, my strength. However, our celebration was abruptly interrupted when a commotion arose at the entrance. Rushing over, I saw a man trying to force his way into the wedding. I immediately recognized him, my father. His words, laced with anger, sent chills through me. When his gaze met mine, he called out, "My sweet daughter, I've been wanting to meet you for so long. Come to your father." His voice felt like a nightmare, and before I could process what was happening, everything went black, and I lost consciousness. When I woke, my husband was at my side, assuring me that my father had been taken to a mental hospital. He wasn't in his right mind and had been diagnosed with several conditions. My husband promised me that I would never have to see him again, even suggesting we could move away if it made me feel safer. The relief I felt at the thought of never having to see my father again was indescribable. We relocated and continued running our businesses, mostly working from home with occasional short trips. Finally, I had the peace I had spent my life searching for, and I found it in my new family. Having endured similar struggles with difficult parents, I understand the challenges you've faced. You were never at fault in this situation. I hope peace and happiness continue to follow you. Best of luck. Your father's actions were unforgivable. He belongs behind bars. Who treats their children like that? I'm relieved you escaped that nightmare, and your father is entirely to blame. Wishing you endless peace and love. Now, on to the second story. I'm a 25-year-old woman with a beautiful 4-bedroom house. I bought the property when I was 23, after my business partner took our shared assets in exchange for $600,000. We co-owned several properties, having made our first purchase when we were 20 and 21, back when we were still dating. Although our romantic relationship ended, we remained business partners. At 23, I finalized the purchase of my home. At the time, I was working part-time while managing our properties. My house was mostly empty, with only a few belongings from my old apartment, as I hadn't yet fully settled in. My dream was always to become a pastry chef, and I enrolled in a local community college offering a free 16-week certification program. It was there that I met James, a 27-year-old chef at a high-end restaurant. We hit it off instantly, and he became a major part of my life, even helping me set up my bakery. In Jamaica on August 8, 2022, James proposed, and when we returned home, I moved in with him. I had spent months perfecting recipes in my kitchen, which I had designed meticulously to suit my tastes. To avoid distractions, I often set my phone to do not disturb mode, which James didn't appreciate. But I stuck to my routine and rarely veered from it. A week ago, I missed several calls from James because of my phone being on DND. He suggested getting a key to my place for emergencies, but I declined, explaining that I needed time to adjust to living with someone. Recently, I discovered that he had a spare key in his car, which prompted me to change the locks with my brother's help. During dinner last night, I confronted James about the key. I assured him it was now useless, as I had changed the locks. We argued, and we haven't spoken since. Am I being unreasonable? My father kicked me out of our home, leaving me to fend for myself for 4 years, blaming me unjustly for money missing from the house. Now, he's returned, claiming he wants to meet and offering an apology, along with a tempting proposition. I couldn't help but laugh at his audacity. I've never had any affection for my father, and his past actions are the reason why. Parents may scold their children for mistakes, but my father cursed my very existence after my mother's death. He descended into madness, and being his only child, I bore the brunt of his erratic behavior until I turned 18. I was terrified of him. One night, he barged into the living room, accusing me of stealing, grabbed me by my hair, and threw me aside. I cried as he hurled insults at me, accusing me of theft. I pleaded my innocence, but he refused to listen. The argument escalated until he demanded I leave. When I refused, he slapped me again and threw me out, leaving me with nothing, no food, no clothes, no water. I found refuge at a friend's house, whose parents welcomed me as one of their own. They became my new family, offering support and shelter. Despite their advice to report the abuse, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Some part of me didn't want to make things worse for him. Looking back, I realized I should have taken that step. Now, 4 years later, I'm a successful businesswoman running a security company. When I faced my father again, he was unaware of the success I had built. He apologized, blaming his actions on the grief from my mother's death, professing his love and wishing for my happiness. I listened quietly, waiting for the catch. His offer came, a job and a stake in his small manufacturing company. Assuming I was jobless and struggling, I couldn't help but laugh. Between fits of laughter, I shared the story of my success, revealing my thriving business empire. His stunned expression was priceless. As I stood up to leave, I made it clear I never wanted to see him again and warned him not to contact me. As I walked away, a smile crept across my face. The catharsis of releasing that pent-up frustration was incredible. That man had never truly been a father to me, and now I was finally free. But at times, I wondered if I had been too harsh. Life continued as usual after that odd encounter. Then, one day, my father called, his voice filled with desperation. He begged me to take him in, apologizing once more and admitting he had treated me wrongly. He confessed that I deserved better. His transparent attempt to claim a share of my success wasn't lost on me, so I hung up without hesitation. Weeks later, my company had an opening for gatekeepers. I wasn't directly involved in the recruitment process, so I didn't give it much thought. However, fate had other plans. One day, as I entered the building, I saw my father working as a gatekeeper. My mood soured instantly, knowing he had ulterior motives, but I decided to ignore it as long as he didn't cause any problems. Later that evening, I was leaving work when I saw him waiting by the door. At first, I walked past him, heading to my car, but then he called out to me, his face full of remorse. He tried to apologize again, but I rejected him, and his anger flared. He reminded me of the abuse I endured as a child and accused me of daring to speak to him this way. I was horrified, as old memories resurfaced, leaving me paralyzed. Before I could react, he charged at me, hitting me again. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and the security guards rushed to help. I glared at him, informed him that he was fired, and promised to report the incident to the authorities. Given my public standing, the police took my complaint seriously. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and fined heavily. I also shared the details of the abuse from my childhood, which only worsened his punishment. His face haunted my nightmares. Just when I thought I had escaped my past, this event triggered a wave of memories. I sought therapy to cope with the aftermath of the attack. Therapy helped me manage my panic attacks and anxiety. From then on, I took it upon myself to personally review all new security personnel profiles. Although the incident brought my fears to the surface again, I did everything I could to regain some sense of security. A month after the attack, I noticed gradual but steady improvement. The therapy sessions continued, and I started to feel more at ease. Well, it's clear that your fiancé needs to respect your boundaries, but it seems there's a deeper issue here. If you don't feel comfortable letting him into your personal space, perhaps it's time to reevaluate your relationship. You need to feel safe living together, especially if you're planning a future together. Given your age and how little time you've known each other, it might be helpful to have an open, honest conversation. Talk about your feelings, your reasons, and explore how you both can move forward as a couple. Be ready for him to share his perspective and feelings too. It seems this issue is about more than just a house key. There's fault on both sides here. He shouldn't have made a copy of the key without asking for your permission, and you were clear that you didn't approve. However, considering you're engaged and living together, the lack of trust is concerning. Why wouldn't you trust him with a key to your house, especially when he requested it for practical reasons? Given the difficulties his lack of access caused, it seems your relationship is imbalanced, and if this persists, it could become one-sided. You might be contributing to this issue as well. Living together and being engaged should signify a certain level of trust that seems to be missing here. Do you think your engagement can survive after such a big argument? By the way, if you're enjoying this video, give it a thumbs up. Or, if you really want to be a great person, leave them the last slice of cheesecake. Now, let's dive into the next story. I'm a 20-year-old living with 4 roommates, and recently I've had an issue with one of them, Jane, a 29-year-old immigrant who moved here about 4 years ago in search of better job opportunities. Jane joined us 3 months ago, replacing a former roommate who left after her lease expired. Jane and I hadn't had any issues until this particular problem came up. Her family still lives in her home country, which is in a different time zone, so she often FaceTimes with them late at night, usually around 2 or 3 a.m. While it's not every night, it happens frequently, about 4 times a week. What's especially annoying is that she has these calls in the kitchen or living room, and they're often extremely loud. I talked to Jane about it, suggesting that she be more mindful of the noise and perhaps use headphones. She refused, claiming that headphones ruin the experience. I also suggested she try FaceTiming during the day, but she argued that her family would be asleep then. I asked her to keep the noise down because it was waking me up, and I had an early workday. While she seemed to acknowledge the issue, she didn't seem too eager to change and kept changing the subject. Earlier this week, I had a Zoom interview for an internship that could greatly benefit my career. I gave my roommates a week's notice to ensure a quiet house for the interview. However, the night before the interview, around midnight, Jane was loudly FaceTiming in the living room. I woke up, feeling frustrated. I asked Jane to lower the volume, and she assured me it was just a quick goodbye. It quieted down for about 10 minutes, but soon the shouting resumed. I went to her again, explaining how important my interview was, and asked her to be quiet. She apologized and promised to keep it down. Yet, at 1 a.m., I was once again disturbed by her loud conversation. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I went downstairs and yelled at Jane, telling her to be quiet because some of us needed sleep. Her family ended the call when they heard me, and Jane ran to her room crying, refusing to talk to me. She said she missed her family and expected more empathy from me. My other roommate sided with Jane, saying I was too harsh. Now, I'm torn. I feel bad for yelling at her, but I'm so frustrated by her disruptive behavior. It's not okay for her to wake her family up in the middle of the night and disturb everyone else. But she doesn't see the hypocrisy in her actions. Her excuse about headphones ruining the experience is ridiculous. How could headphones ruin the experience? It's a perfectly reasonable request, and her refusal makes no sense. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay stunned.